welcome to the Gardner Fiddle Scottish Fiddle channel. We're going to be talking today about what is it about this tune. It's a new series I'd like to start. Basically taking tunes and finding out what is it about these particular tunes that really makes them special and what makes them so popular. Is there something sort of internally about these tunes? And the first tune I'd like to talk about is one of the most famous pieces of music by the great fiddler Niel Gow, and it's Niel Gow's Lament for the death of his second wife. So stay tuned. So who was Niel Gow? Well, put simply, he was one of the most important figures in Scottish musical history. In fact, the 18th century, which is considered the golden age of the Scottish fiddle, is pretty much defined by Niel Gow's style. Niel was born in Perthshire in Scotland on March 22nd of the year 1727. And I like that because Niel Gow was born on the same birth date as me, several hundred years before me, of course, on March 22nd. So we share a birthday. He was a really good fiddler early on. In fact, he established himself quite early. In the age of 18, he entered a fiddle competition that was judged by a fellow by the name of John McGraw, who was a blind musician, who awarded him the first prize. And when he awarded the prize, he said that he would ken his bow hand among 100 players. So that establishes Niel Gow's style quite early on. Niel Gow was highly regarded all throughout Scotland, and one of the most famous Scottish poets, Robert Burns, regarded him quite well. In fact, quite a few of Robert Burns's songs were set to melodies that were written by Niel Gow. In fact, one of his most famous, "My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose," was actually a Niel Gow melody originally, a tune called Major Graham. So who was Niel Gow's second wife? Niel Gow's second wife was a lady by the name of Margaret Urquhart, and she was from Perth. And when they got married in 1768, and they were married for 30 years. And when she died, he was so grief-stricken that he actually stopped playing for a time until his family convinced him to play again. And one of the first things that he composed was this wonderful, beautiful lament. And we're going to take a really close look at this. But first, let's take a listen to this tune. So, what is it about this tune? So, what I've done is I've gone through and I've taken the original manuscript of this tune, which was published in 1809, actually after Niel Gow's passing, of this tune. It's in Niel Gow's fifth collection of Strathspeys, reels, etc., which was published in 1809. And it was actually published by his son Nathaniel. And I think the bass lines that you see here are Nathaniel's bass lines, but he would have worked very closely with his father Niel to get these bass lines here, as you see. So when you are looking at this, and what I've done is I've done what's called a Roman numeral analysis with this, and I'll switch screens for you here real quick. Okay, so here we are on the analysis page. And what I've done here is I've taken all of the scale degrees and written them out over the accompaniment. Now, the way this works, real quickly, is that each note of the scale has a number. We are here in the key of D, as you can see with the two sharps. And so D is the first note of the scale. So we assign the number 1 to the note D. So 1 is D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So those are the numbers that go with the scale degrees. So what I've done here is for all of the different chords that are going through here, if we look at this particular one right here, the D is a number 1, and that's called the tonic, or the first note of the scale. And if you count up from the D to the next chord here that happens in this particular piece, it's an A. And the A is the 5th scale degree, and it builds an A chord here. It's not a full chord, but it actually lines out the chord. And so so I put a number 5 there, and you'll notice that all of these are uppercase. So all of the uppercase letters are major chords. And if you have a lowercase letter, which if you go down here, the B minor is lowercase. So the minors are lowercase Roman numerals. And that's the way that you can kind of follow the chord progressions and the different cadences. Now, what I found really interesting in analyzing this piece of music was that the cadences are not what we call, usual. The most common cadence is when you go from a 5 chord to a 1 chord. That's the strongest cadence, and that's called an authentic cadence. But that's very, very rarely. I'm not quite sure if there are any authentic cadences in this entire piece. And so Niel Gow actually opted for a different kind of cadence. So let's listen to the chord progression as it goes. So I'll just let you listen to the first part, and I'll stop it after we get to the repeat, so you don't have to listen to it both times through. Okay, so there we are at the end of the first part. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a question mark right here. Well, I actually fixed a note. The original note here was actually this note right here. In the original manuscript, that note is a D. And when I was doing the analysis didn't make any sense because you've got a D against an E. Well, a D against an E is an incredibly dissonant sound. listen to this. This is a D against an E. That is not consonant. I think what actually was intended was this note instead. So I move that up. If you listen to the actual chord progression as it's going through, listen to when you get to that note. Listen to what's happening. That doesn't make any sense. So what I did was I took this and moved it up what I thought made the most sense. Now listen to this. So that makes a lot more sense for the piece. So that's why I did that. Now I've put the word deceptive cadence here. Now, if you remember what I was saying, was the normal cadence that you would have goes from a 5 to a 1. But right here in this particular measure, he goes from a 5 to a 4. So he goes from an A to a G instead of going from an A to a D. And what that does is that's called a deceptive cadence. So you're expecting something to finish. But what happens is he leaves you hanging and then he goes down to the D. So he's sort of deceiving you. He's kind of pulling you along. He's like, I'm going to say that we're almost done, but no, we're going to keep going. So listen to how that kind of keeps you up in the air. So there we go. We've got that really interesting sort of pushing you forward, sort of longingly. He just goes, and this is a lament. Just remember, he's remembering the 3 decades of happiness that he had with his wife. So he puts a deceptive cadence here, and then this this measure right here has what's called a plagal half cadence. And what that is, a half cadence is instead of going from a 1 to a 5, from a 5 to a 1, you switch it around. So it sort of it upends the cadence. And this is called a plagal half cadence. When you use the 4 instead of the 5, it's called a plagal cadence. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the plagal cadence in a second. But let's just talk about that right now. Let's move straight to the end of this section here. Listen to how he ends this. That sound going from a 4 to a 1 instead of a 5 to a 1 is called a plagal cadence. Now, a plagal cadence is sometimes known as the church cadence, or sometimes even more commonly known as the Amen cadence, because it's what you hear at the end of a hymn. Amen, that thing at the end. So you've got, and so listen to that again. That's think of Amen at the end of that phrase. Okay, so that's what he's doing there. He's giving you that church cadence, which is a little bit more contemplative. It's not as strong. It's still kind of it's a little weaker cadence, and it's sometimes more soothing. It doesn't bash you in the head. It's a more subtle way to end a phrase. And so, like I was saying, up here in the in this part here, that's where the plagal half cadence, because you take a regular cadence and you switch it around like that. So already he's established this theme. Da 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 da. That whole theme is sort of what he's building on throughout this. So he makes you listen to that twice. Okay. And then what happens is he starts moving you around with with things. So listen to what happens here. Okay, we'll stop it right there. Okay, so what's happening here is this chord progression is a very interesting chord progression. It goes uh, it goes roughly from a 1 to a 5 to a minor 6 to a 4. And this is really interesting because when you're going from a 5, which has a lot of tension, it's sort of it's a sort of dissonant, and it gives you a lot of tension. And when you're moving from the 5 to the 1 acts sort of with consonants, and there's a release. So there's this tension and release. So you've got release into tension, 1 5 into 6 into 4. And so what the 6 to the 4 does is it sort of delays that overall resolution. So it kind of it again, it's pulling you along. And that minor 6 is the relative minor of the 1, the tonic. So it sort of it shows you the relative minor of that. And the minor has a sadder sound about it. So what happens is this eventually makes the resolution to 1 even more satisfying once you go through this, and it eventually brings you all the way back to the church cadence or the plagal cadence. So listen to how he does that. Listen to that section again. See how he got to that plagal cadence? He finally got it. And it's like it was pulling you along and pulling you along and pulling you along until you got to that plagal cadence, which is right there. Okay, right in this area right here. You've got the 4 to the 1, that nice, beautiful plagal cadence. Now, what happens here is very interesting. Listen, listen particularly to the bass line, particularly here. Listen to what he's doing with that. We'll start on that. So I'll stop it right there. Did you see what he did there? He in this measure right here, he took the bass line and was stepping things up chromatically. And that is a very common thing in this time period. You think about the early 1800s. We're talking about the same time period as Beethoven and the late classical, early romantic period composers, and um, they're using this wonderful stepwise chromaticism to lead you into that another half cadence, and it just it just is a beautiful way to lead the listener to go, to sort of go to the next part. And so what he does is you get this well, let's start here again. So that chromaticism dropped you into that half cadence, which tricked you into going into the tonic again. But then look what's going on here. We've got another one of those deceptive cadences, and he wants you to sit on that deceptive cadence. It just sits there and just hangs for a while. He wrote that fermata in there. That is actually in the original manuscript, and it's a beautiful way to just let you wait for that moment, and you have all this longing, and then he finishes it. Just listen to how he finishes it. He finishes it with that gorgeous plagal cadence again. And this whole area at the end, the last theme is the original theme from the very beginning of the piece that you were introduced at the very beginning. So it comes around full circle. It bookends it, and it's such a perfectly composed piece of music. It's just absolutely beautiful. So, what is it about this piece? Well, there you have it. I think it's pretty clear. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece, and it's so well constructed. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that analysis of mine of Niel Gow's lament for the death of his second wife, and take a really close look at what makes this tune a wonderful tune. If you like this, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you have any suggestions of other tunes that you'd like me to go through like this and figure out what is it about this tune that makes it so wonderful. As always, thanks for coming by. Have a lovely day.